Good morning, not good night. This was a little goodie that we got last night from Warner Brothers because we were at the premiere of Birds of Prey, which I'll talk about second. So there are two films that opened yesterday in Hong Kong. The first is It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and the second is Birds of Prey. So let me talk about It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood first. As you can imagine, it is about Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers. So this is not the documentary, which was called, what was the documentary called? What was the documentary? It's so early in the morning. Won't You Be My Neighbor? From a couple years ago. Fabulous documentary. If you've never seen it, certainly check it out. So this is an interesting take on Fred Rogers' life, sort of, or a period of his life. It is, they say, inspired by true events. What that really means is it's not true. It's based on, loosely based on, a story that was written by Esquire magazine writer, what's his name, Tom Jurod, who interviewed Mr. Rogers for a piece a few years back. Well, I guess quite a few years back, because Mr. Rogers, I think, died in 2001. So it must have been the end of the 1990s. And so this is based on that. It's not even that. It's based on that. So they took that story and created another story around that. So before I get into the story, just, as you probably know, I mean, it's Mr. Rogers in this film is played by Tom Hanks, and perfect casting choice, because look, Tom Hanks is America's most trusted actor, and Mr. Rogers was America's most trusted TV personality after Walter Cronkite, or maybe before Walter Cronkite. I know you young people don't even know who Walter Cronkite was. Look him up, check him out. So I need to drink. It is dry and it is early today, and hopefully coronavirus free. All right, now in this movie we have Lloyd Vogel, who is the avatar for Tom Jurod, because they've changed the story so much that they couldn't call him Tom Jurod. So his name is Lloyd Vogel. He's played by Matthew Rice. People would know him if you watch TV. He was the star, a co-star of TV's The Americans for many years. He was most recently in the movie The Post, playing Daniel Elbert. He is in this movie. He plays a hard-boiled writer, as I said, for Esquire magazine, and his editor, who's played by Oscar winner Christine Lahti from TV Chicago Hope. People my age would remember that. She informs him, as I said, the magazine wants to do an anthology on the subject of heroes, and she wants him to interview the beloved kids TV icon Fred Rogers and put together 400 words for a collection of stories she's compiling. 400 words is not a lot. Now, Vogel is the least likely person for this assignment, because he's known for knocking public idols off their pedestals. There's a very interesting scene where his wife says, "Please don't ruin my childhood." I can imagine that was true. Now, but this apparently, and I suppose this is true, Rogers had read Vogel's work, and he requested the writer. He wanted Vogel to write something on him. So Vogel heads to their meeting, expecting Rogers to be a complete phony, but his eyes are soon opened to the man's, I gotta stop playing with this bat, to the man's sincerity and innate goodness. And what was supposed to be a short meeting turns into multiple conversations, as Rogers understands that Vogel is in need of a neighbor whom he can trust. Now, as I said, as nice as this story is, it's a really beautiful story. You're gonna, I don't know that I didn't cry. You're gonna be verklempt, to use the Jewish expression. Verklempt. Look it up. Verklempt. It's just not true. So to call this film a biopic is a stretch. The events are sort of, as I said, the events are sort of true. Lloyd Vogel is a fictional character, and Tom Jurod is the real character. And apparently there's no evidence that Tom Jurod had the kind of parental issues that Lloyd Vogel has in this movie. So as I said, they took Tom Gerard's events, and they crafted this whole story about Lloyd Vogel having parental issues and Mr. Rogers solving those issues. Now, Hanks, not surprisingly, because he's a fabulous actor, he does a wonderful job here. He brings Rogers back to life by getting into the icon's speech cadence and body movements absolutely just right, though the actor is considerably chunkier by comparison. Rogers was a very lean 143 pounds. I read the article by Tom Gerard. You can read it online. So I read it, and there is a little bit about him being 143 pounds. And Hanks is considerably more than that. I think Hanks is even a couple inches taller, but that's neither here nor there. But there's one scene where you see Hanks as Mr. Rogers jumping into the swimming pool to swim his laps, because Mr. Rogers swam every day. And Fred Rogers swam every day. And just as he's about to jump in, the camera, Tom Hanks sort of turns his body, the camera turns a little bit, and you don't see the front of his body, because clearly his body doesn't look like somebody who swims legs every day. So that was a little bit amusing. But I think other than that, let's leave that all aside. I think he did a wonderful job. And the film really shows us what a real deal Rogers was. And I said that when I watched the documentary. Rogers truly was the real deal. And there are more than a few Christians in America, well, probably everywhere, but let's talk about the Christians in America who could learn a few things from Fred Rogers. And what he was so good at was he instinctively knew how to reach into people's hearts and get them to put a voice to their feelings, whether he used his hand puppet, Daniel the Tiger. I used to have hand puppets. I love them. Or just offered a hug and a few softly spoken words. Now, as for Rice, he puts in a solid performance too. He's a wonderful actor. I think he's an underrated actor in my opinion. I guess now that I think the TV show is finished, maybe now he'll do more movies. He is a very, very good actor. And he does a wonderful job here portraying or giving, showing us the character's inner turmoil. It's written all over his face. And Fred Rogers sees that, we see that, and I thought that was very, very well done. Now, while this film is very, very different from the documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, comparisons will be made between the two films, and I'm going to make one right now. This film comes up slightly short because at the end of the day, it's about a real person placed in a fictional situation. Now, of course, it's reasonable to assume that had this really happened, Rogers would have behaved this way, but we'll never know because it never happened. Now, even so, I would say A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is still well worth watching. It's very interesting that this film has come to Hong Kong because nobody here knows who Mr. Rogers is. I was asking some local Hong Kong friends if they know who he is. Some of them who studied in America or are familiar with American pop culture, they said, yeah, we know who he is, but we never saw the show. And so certainly most people here don't know who he is. So because of that, I don't expect the film to last very long in the cinema. Besides, these days with coronavirus, nobody's going to the cinema. So if you do want to see it in the cinema here in Hong Kong, I think you got about a week or two at most before it heads to the subscription services. And it will, it's distributed by a company here that does own a pay-per-view channel. So, and I'm not going to mention their name because I don't want to give them any extra business. They don't deserve it. So I'd say, yeah, if you want to see it in the cinema, you got to do it this week or next. After that, you'll get to watch it on TV, or I'm sure it's even playing in the airplanes right now. So that's A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I'd say, yeah, good film. Not a great film, but a good film. Solid film. So that is the first film. The second one, which I saw last night, and I'm still working out what I want to say. So this is going to be a little bit scattered, I think. Hold on a second. Is Birds of Prey, or its full name is Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. Now, despite being panned both by audiences and critics, I think critics hated the film I'm about to mention more than audiences did, but still. The 2016 film Suicide Squad, the one starring Jared Leto as Joker, it was a box office hit. People hated it, but it still did extremely well at the box office, about $750 million. So it was a big money maker for Warner Brothers. Now that film introduced audiences to one Harleen Quinzel, aka Harley Quinn, who's played by Margot Robbie. Who's this past year has been a busy year. She was in Bombshell. She was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She was in Mary Queen of Scots. So and of course, I, Tonya. She was up for an Oscar for I, Tonya. I think, when is she up for an Oscar for? Bombshell? I can't remember. Or is she up for an Oscar? I can't remember. Or maybe she's not this year. So yeah, but she was up for an Oscar for I, Tonya. So she's in everything. And she plays, as I said, Harley Quinn. She is a former clinical psychologist turned supervillain and Joker's main squeeze and partner in crime. Now, many people felt that Robbie was the best and perhaps only good thing about that film, and Robbie probably thought so too. She lobbied the suits at Warner Brothers for years to give Harley her own film, and that's what we have here with Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One, Harley Quinn. Now, don't worry if you haven't seen Suicide Squad, and lucky you if you haven't. You'll do just fine with this storyline, as Quinn not only reveals in her complete whack-jobby manner some of her origin story, she also tells audiences that she and Joker are no longer a thing. Now, that latter little bit of news is not a spoiler, as it's in the trailer. Now, it appears, though, that most of Gotham City hasn't heard that news, and but when they have, that she's no longer under the Joker's protection, every goon in town is out for her for one reason or another. And that is moderately humorous, the way she explains the reason why all these people individually are after her. And I won't get into that. If you want to see it, you can watch the movie. Now, as an off-the-chain psychopath, Quinn has made a lot of enemies, needless to say. And one of those literally wants a pound of her flesh, and that is sadistic Gotham crime boss Roman Sionis, played by Ewan McGregor, who was most recently in Dr. Sleep. But Quinn manages to convince him that she'll be able to retrieve the valuable Bertinelli diamond that was pinched from his cleanup guy and BFF, the even more sadistic Victor Zsasz, played by Chris Messina, who I have to say was probably one of the best parts of this film. He was pickpocketed by Cassandra Cain, a teenager, and then, unfortunately, now this is going to get really convoluted here. Quinn's plan to get the diamond back gets a little bit complicated because Gotham police detective Renee Montoya, played by Rosie Perez, is after Quinn for blowing up a chemical factory. She's after Sionis for being a bad guy. She's after Cain for stealing the diamond. She's after a few other people in the movie. Then there's Sionis' nightclub singer, the sultry Diana Lance, aka Black Canary, played by Jernee Smollett-Bell, who's Jesse Smollett's sister, by the way. People might know her from TV's True Blood. She wants to protect Cain from her boss. Then there's mafia crime family orphan Helena Bertinelli of the Bertinelli Diamond. She's also known as Huntress. She's played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. People might know her from TV's Fargo. She wants revenge on the people who offed her family a few years before. Now, these 5 women decide to team up and rid Gotham City of its testosterone-filled scumbags, of which there are many. Now, did you get all that? Because that was rather confusing. And honestly, as you watch the film, you really have to pay attention. Now, while this film is vastly superior to its predecessor, Birds of Prey is still messed up, completely messed up. It starts off well, it dives headlong into Quinn's mania, but then the excitement wears off. And 15 boring minutes later, the crazy ramps up again, and then it goes comatose for another 10 minutes. And this is what happens for the whole film. It just goes up and then down, and then up and then down, and then up. And it just seems like this 109 minutes just lasts forever. I knew going into the film it was 109 minutes, and I didn't look at my watch once, but I kept thinking. I'd say certainly after about an hour, I was saying, when is this going to end? Because this is like one really boring roller coaster that just it the I'd say the best scenes to me are the fight scenes, and I'll talk about the fight scenes in half a second. But even they're repetitive, and then but then in the in between parts are just so boring. And even Robbie seems bored halfway through, and she begins to phone in her performance. They don't film generally. They don't film shoot movies in sequence. Um, but maybe this one they did because she had just so much energy at the beginning of the film, and by after an hour, even she had no energy. So now, going into this film, I really try to know as little as I can before I go into a film because I don't want to be biased at all. I was hoping this film was going to be dark, like Joker was. And unfortunately, it wasn't. To me, this film needed to be dark. And I don't know, like, what is this with Warner Brothers and the DC franchise? They just can't seem to get. Look, they made a fortune on Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman, but you know what? They can't seem to get the tones of these films right. And I think maybe this was the problem here too. Maybe they're just interfering too much. That they're saying no, we don't want it dark. We want it more this way. But this is an R-rated film because every other word is F, mostly spoken by Ewan McGregor, and there are some scenes that are, in terms of, it's very interesting. This film is written by a woman. It's written by Christina Hodson, who wrote Bumblebee, and directed by Kathy Yan, who this is her first studio movie. She did a movie called Dead Pigs, which was one of the darlings of the 2018 Sundance Film Festival. So written by a woman, directed by a woman, starring. It's female led, but at times it's really show. I mean, there's girl power, which is great, but there's one scene that's like really cringingly chauvinistic. And as I watched this, I thought, wow, like, are there women involved in this film? Because this is like really chauvinistic. Maybe that was the point. Like maybe they wanted to say, look how awful these men are. I don't know that point was really made with that scene, rather than just being, terribly chauvinistic. So I don't know. To me, this film just didn't really have the right. First of all, tonally, it was like, like a ping pong game. But generally, the tone was the wrong tone for what this film needed to be. And that was disappointing. Now, as I said just a few minutes ago about the fight scenes, that I actually liked them, even though they got repetitive. The word is that the studio had brought in John Wick director and stunt coordinator Chad Stahelski last August to reshoot those scenes because I guess what Kathy Yan had done on her own was not good. These, at least, there is some really good choreography that, you could see that had his mark on it and clearly not hers, because it was like watching two different movies at that point. So now, as for the actors, look, she was wonderful. Margot Robbie, putting aside that she did phone it in after a little bit. Look, she put her all into it, and good for her. Look, she's a producer of the film. She's got a financial stake in this film. But, I thought, as good as she was, the movie didn't live up to it. Ewan McGregor completely miscast in this film. He was awful. He was really, really awful. I want her to kill him in the first act. Unfortunately, we had to wait till the end of the film for that to happen. No great spoiler. That's going to happen. And I thought that Smollett Bell and Winstead were underutilized. I thought they were really good characters. And, look, maybe DC or maybe Warner Brothers has plans to spin them off into their own, give them their own films, or, explore them a little bit more. Okay, I can see that. But here they were underutilized. I would have liked to have seen more of them. Now, as for that diamond that I mentioned, which was the key to the whole story, it's dealt with in such a poor way because, this is really what the whole film is all about, is this diamond. And then at the end, it's just sort of, it's like, oh yeah, here's what we did with the diamond. Thank you, bye, closing credits, and that's it. Oh my God, the script, in terms of the script, I think there was probably a lot edited out at that point that ended up on the editing room floor, because it just seemed to be the last 10 minutes of the film just seemed to be so rushed that maybe they said, "Oh well, we got to wrap this up. We want it under 2 hours, and let's just cut," and it was dealt with really badly, way too fast. Not enough time was spent on that, so that was disappointing. Now, that being said, even though I said this film is a mess and not totally all over the map and the wrong tone, it'll still make $750 million at least. Look, it's a better film than Suicide Squad, so it's got to make. It should, by all rights, it should make more than Suicide Squad. So it'll make at least $750 million. I don't know that it will though, because look, the China market right now is shut. It's there are no cinemas are open in China, and that's a big source of revenue for Hollywood studios these days. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Now, if you're a DC Extended Universe fanboy or fangirl, you're going to see this film no matter what I think of it. So you're just going to listen to me and go, he's full of crap. I don't care. I'm going to go see it. That's fine. Go see it. Have a good time. If you're not, though, you can safely give this film a miss and soundly sleep at night. If you can see it, go to the cinema and fall asleep there. Might be more comfortable. So that is Birds of Prey. I was very, very disappointed. I was looking forward to seeing something along the lines of Joker being a very dark film and crazy because she's a crazy character. It wasn't dark. It was barely crazy. It was crazy for 20 minutes, and that was about it. The rest was boring. So that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about. So next week, I got a French film next week, among other things. I've already seen that. I can't remember what else I got. And that's it. So have a good week. Have a good weekend. Stay coronavirus free wherever you are. See ya.